Have you ever wondered what blood ties are worth? My mother priced my existence at $30,000. They thought I was just a parasite to crush with cheap threats. They had no idea that when you corner a wolf, you better pray she does not hold the keys to your entire empire. I did not cry. I simply smiled, packed my bags, and let them light the bomb that would obliterate their fake lives in exactly 7 days. Hello and welcome back to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Thank you so much for your continuous support. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us with no budget to operate, which means we will be forced to stop uploading new videos here in the near future and move our operations entirely over to Patreon. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon community to hear exclusive real-life stories that are even better, longer, and feature incredibly detailed situations and multiple emotional voice actors that we simply cannot publish on YouTube. You can join by scanning the QR code currently on your screen or by clicking the Patreon link in the description or pinned comment of this video. Now, let us begin today's story of 29-year-old River Ray. My name is River Ray. I am 29 years old and work as a systems engineer for Apex Node Solutions, a high-tier cybersecurity firm. Despite earning a solid living, I was temporarily staying in the guest house on the grounds of my family's sprawling estate in the wealthy suburbs of Oak Creek, Illinois. I thought staying close was a way to maintain some semblance of family connection, a way to be a good daughter. I was horribly wrong. The air in that massive house was always heavy, dripping with a suffocating blend of arrogance and unspoken resentments that clawed at my throat every time I walked through the front door. Friday night dinners were a mandatory affair, an exhausting, hollow theater production where everyone played their designated roles. My mother, Beatrice, was the star of the show. She was the self-proclaimed self-made owner of a booming online fashion brand, always dripping in designer labels and fake humility. My father, Richard, was a former local politician who had bankrupted himself years ago through his insatiable appetite for luxury and reckless spending. Then there was Trent, my golden boy older brother. He was currently drowning in debt from foolish cryptocurrency investments, though he still carried himself like a billionaire tech guru who was just one lucky trade away from buying a private jet. The clinking of expensive silverware against fine china echoed sharply in the cavernous dining room. I was quietly eating my roast beef when the twisted performance began. Beatrice did not say a word at first. She just reached into the pocket of her tailored blazer, pulled out a thick, printed invoice, and slammed it onto the mahogany table right next to my plate. The loud smack made me jump. I glanced down. The bold ink at the bottom of the page demanded $30,000. Under the description line, it read, "Retroactive rent and living expenses." I looked up, trying to process the sheer absurdity of the document sitting beside my half-eaten meal. Beatrice stared back at me with cold, calculating eyes, her lips pressed into a tight, incredibly smug line. The silence in the room was deafening, thick enough to choke on. It was the kind of dead silence that predator animals make right before they snap your neck. Then, my father leaned back in his leather chair, swirling his glass of expensive scotch with a lazy, arrogant flick of his wrist. "You have until Monday to pay $5,000 up front," Richard declared, his voice completely devoid of any paternal warmth, slicing through the quiet room like a blade. "If you do not transfer the money, I will call the police and report that your Jeep Wrangler is stolen. Or better yet, I will confiscate it myself and sell it to deduct from your debt." I slowly turned my gaze to Trent. He was slouching in his chair, a disgusting, self-satisfied smirk plastered across his face. He had his smartphone raised, the red recording light blinking steadily as he filmed my reaction. He was treating my extortion like a joke for his private group chats, hoping to catch me crying or begging. It did not take a genius to figure out the math. Trent had recently lost tens of thousands of dollars in a massive crypto crash, and violent debt collectors were allegedly already circling him. The family had clearly made a silent, sickening pact before I even arrived for dinner. They were going to use me as a human shield to cover his massive losses. They were going to extort the money out of me, or steal the car I bought with my own hard-earned money. simply because they believed I was a weak, dependent little girl who would cave under their absolute authority. The air in the room felt utterly toxic, burning my lungs with every breath. As I looked at the three of them, the illusion of family shattered into a million jagged pieces on the hardwood floor. Beatrice's icy glare, Richard's arrogant posture, Trent's mocking laugh. I realized in that singular, agonizing moment that I had never been a daughter to them. I had never been a sister. In their greedy eyes, I was nothing more than a backup automated teller machine, a convenient financial safety net they could violently tear open whenever they needed cash to maintain their pathetic, crumbling facade of wealth. They waited for the tears. They eagerly waited for me to beg, to plead, to ask how my own flesh and blood could be so cruel. They wanted a pathetic show of despair to validate their dominance, but the panic they so desperately anticipated never came. Instead, a profound, terrifying calmness washed over my entire body. I did not utter a single word of protest. I did not give them the satisfaction of my anger. I simply picked up my linen napkin, carefully wiped the corners of my mouth, and placed it neatly next to the $30,000 invoice. I gently set my fork down on the porcelain plate, the faint clink echoing against their sudden, bewildered silence. I stood up, pushed my heavy chair back, and walked straight toward the heavy oak doors. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, leaving the dining room behind forever, I could hear Trent burst into triumphant laughter, fully convinced they had broken me. The walk from the grand dining room to the guest house took exactly 2 minutes. I did not shed a single tear. There was no time for sorrow, and frankly, there was no sorrow left to give. The moment the heavy wooden door clicked shut behind me, the cold, clinical side of my brain, the systems engineer, took complete control of my body. It was time for a hard, unforgiving reset. I walked straight into my walk-in closet and pulled out 3 heavy-duty, shock-proof travel cases. I did not bother packing clothes or sentimental trinkets first. Fabric and memories were entirely replaceable. I went straight for the glowing, beating heart of the room, my custom-built, ultra-high-performance server rack. The gentle, rhythmic hum of the cooling fans and the blinking blue indicator lights had been the constant background noise of my life for the past 3 years. Now, it was time to pull the plug and plunge their world into darkness. My hands moved with practiced, mechanical precision. My movements were fast, decisive, and completely devoid of any hesitation. I detached the thick fiber optic cables, unscrewed the heavy metal mounting brackets, and carefully extracted the massive enterprise-grade hard drives, one by one. Each drive slid into a custom-fitted foam slot in the fortified suitcases. These drives contained my entire life's work, my heavily encrypted codebases, and most importantly, the ultimate, devastating weapon my family had completely forgotten about in their blind, desperate greed. While Beatrice paraded around high society galas, bragging to local magazines about her brilliant, self-made, multi-million-dollar fashion empire, she conveniently omitted a massive, fundamental detail. Her entire booming business was nothing more than an empty, glamorous shell wrapped around a highly sophisticated digital engine that belonged exclusively to me. 3 years ago, when Richard lost his political seat and their lavish, aristocratic lifestyle began to rapidly crumble under the weight of mounting, reckless debts, I stepped in to save them. I naively thought it was my duty. I desperately wanted to be the good, supportive daughter they could finally be proud of. So, I spent 6 agonizing months coding a proprietary, fully automated software ecosystem from absolute scratch. I meticulously built the complex inventory management system that flawlessly tracked every single piece of silk and cotton across her 4 international warehouses. I programmed the highly secure payment gateways that smoothly processed thousands of lucrative transactions daily without taking a massive third-party cut. I designed the intricate logistics chain that automatically routed shipping labels, calculated international customs duties, and managed ruthless supplier invoices. And the most pathetic part of it all? I hosted this entire colossal monstrosity on my own personal servers, maintaining it silently in the background, absolutely free of charge. I fixed critical bugs at 3 in the morning, just so they could keep sipping their expensive scotch, buying designer bags, and pretending they were still local royalty. My code was the invisible, unbreakable spine holding up their entire financial existence, and tonight I was ripping that spine right out of their backs. I snapped the heavy steel latches on the travel cases shut, sealing away their livelihood. Next came the legalities. I opened my biometric fireproof safe and grabbed a thick, heavy manila folder. Inside was the pristine, official title to my Jeep Wrangler, neatly resting alongside the vehicle registration and comprehensive insurance documents. The vehicle was completely, undeniably, and legally in my name. I bought it with my first major corporate bonus. I paid every single cent for the rugged off-road suspension upgrades and the custom tires. Richard had absolutely zero legal standing to even touch the door handle, let alone try to report it stolen to the authorities. I shoved the vital folder into my heavy leather backpack, followed quickly by my primary laptop and a few essential changes of dark clothes. Exactly 2 hours had passed since I walked out of that suffocating dining room. The guest house, once vibrating with the quiet, immense power of my servers, was now eerily silent, dark, and utterly hollow. But I was not quite done just yet. I flipped open my laptop, connected to the local area network one last time, and initiated a rigorous, aggressive digital scrubbing protocol. I meticulously wiped my machine access control addresses from their primary router, permanently deleted every single network log file, and completely severed my virtual private network tunnel that connected my systems to the main house. By the time I hit the enter key to execute the final command, it was as if my digital ghost had never even existed on their property. I left their internal network completely blind and vulnerable. I grabbed my heavy backpack and muscled the rolling travel cases out the front door, locking the deadbolt behind me for the very last time. The crisp night air hit my face, and the sprawling, manicured estate was dead quiet, save for the faint, muffled sound of classical music drifting from the open windows of the main house. They were probably still in there celebrating, clinking expensive glasses to their brilliant, flawless extortion scheme, completely oblivious to the horrific fact that they had just slit their own financial throats. I loaded the incredibly heavy cases into the reinforced trunk of my Jeep, ensuring every strap was pulled tight so nothing would shift. I climbed into the driver's seat, the familiar, comforting scent of leather grounding my racing thoughts. I did not look back at the towering mansion. I firmly pressed the ignition button. The powerful, upgraded engine roared to life instantly, a deep, aggressive, vibrating growl that violently sliced through the silent, suffocating atmosphere of Oak Creek. I shifted the heavy gear selector into drive and accelerated aggressively down the long, winding, tree-lined driveway. I was heading straight toward a premium, highly secure serviced apartment I had discreetly rented earlier that week in a neighboring state. It was a hidden sanctuary they knew absolutely nothing about. The bright LED headlights cut sharply through the pitch-black road ahead, illuminating the immediate path to my absolute, uncompromised freedom. They truly thought they had cornered a scared, helpless little mouse. But as my massive tires finally hit the open asphalt of the main highway, I knew with absolute certainty that they were about to wake up trapped in a burning cage of their own making. The morning sun was barely bleeding over the skyline when I finally finished meticulously setting up my new command station. My high-rise apartment was completely bare, save for a small couch, a coffee maker, and the massive, glowing wall of monitors. I had just assembled on a heavy steel desk. I did not need furniture right now. I only needed bandwidth. My fingers hovered over the mechanical keyboard, feeling the cool, familiar plastic. This was my domain. Out there, in the physical world, they might have had the grand estate and the political connections. But in here, inside the sprawling, intricate architecture of the digital world, I was a god. I opened a secure, encrypted terminal and bypassed the standard user interfaces, diving straight into the raw, unadulterated backend of the e-commerce platform. The black screen reflected in my eyes, rapidly filling with lines of crisp green text as I queried the master control nodes. It was time to sever the cord. My first target was the licensing matrix. With 3 swift, deliberate lines of code, I permanently revoked the global usage license I had silently granted them. The system instantly recognized the proprietary software as unauthorized. My second target was the central nervous system. I accessed the primary cloud database, the massive churning vault that held every single piece of customer data, every active shopping cart, every supplier invoice, and every real-time inventory count. I did not delete the data. I simply executed a complete, catastrophic network bridge termination. I decoupled the glossy, user-facing website from the database. In a fraction of a second, the entire front end of my mother's multi-million-dollar business became a ghost town, unable to pull or push a single byte of information. Finally, I went for the jugular, the money. I navigated to the payment processing application programming interfaces. I aggressively blocked the security tokens and permanently closed the transaction gateways. The digital registers were now welded shut. No credit cards could be charged. No funds could be routed. The financial heart of Beatrice's empire flatlined with a silent, invisible beep. To ensure there was absolutely no confusion about what had just transpired, I logged into the global domain registry. I stripped away their pristine routing tables and forcefully redirected every single web request. If anyone, from a wealthy socialite customer to my mother herself, tried to access the boutique's web address, they would not find a sleek page of summer dresses. Instead, they would be violently thrown against a stark, pitch-black screen displaying a single, brutal message in bold red font: System offline. Software copyright violation. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, interlacing my fingers behind my head. The bomb was planted, armed, and ticking. Now, all I had to do was watch the clock. Over the course of the next 4 days, my smartphone became a tragic, hilarious exhibit of pure, unadulterated delusion. My family remained completely, blissfully blind to the massive digital crater I had just blown into their lives. They were so technologically illiterate, so deeply disconnected from the actual mechanics of their own wealth, that they likely assumed the website was just undergoing routine weekend maintenance. Instead of checking their collapsing analytics dashboards, they were entirely, obsessively fixated on their pathetic extortion plot. My voicemail inbox rapidly filled with the booming, authoritative voice of Richard. He sounded utterly drunk on his own perceived power. You have exactly 24 hours to bring that vehicle back to my driveway. River, he barked in one message, his tone dripping with condescension. I have a heavy-duty tow truck on standby. The local police department has been fully briefed on your little stunt. You will pay the initial $5,000, or you will be arrested for grand theft auto. Do not test my patience. Beatrice's approach was vastly more vindictive. My text message notifications pinged relentlessly, delivering high-resolution photographs of rusted, towering piles of crushed metal at local auto wrecking yards. She accompanied these gruesome images with mocking, venomous captions. This is exactly where your precious little toy is going to end up. She texted on Tuesday afternoon. You cannot outsmart this family, pay your back rent, or watch your beloved car get compressed into a tiny, worthless cube of scrap iron. Your move, sweetie. They were celebrating a victory in a war they had already lost. They spent their days drinking imported wine, eagerly anticipating my surrender, completely unaware that the very foundation of their lavish existence had been ripped out from underneath them days ago. Every threat they hurled at me, every arrogant demand for $30,000, only amplified the deafening silence of their frozen bank accounts. The countdown was silently ticking away in the background, inching closer and closer to absolute zero, and the fools were too busy polishing their crowns to notice the castle was already up in flames. Day 6 dawned bright and early. This was supposed to be Beatrice's crowning moment. The highly anticipated summer collection drop was her largest campaign of the entire year. She had poured a small fortune into social media advertising, influencer marketing, and glossy digital promotional materials. The projected revenue for this single day was supposed to shatter all previous records, easily pulling in hundreds of thousands of dollars before lunchtime. This was the massive cash injection they all desperately needed to maintain their aristocratic illusion and quietly sweep Trent's massive financial blunders under the rug. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, the digital floodgates opened. Tens of thousands of eager customers clicked the promotional links, their credit cards ready. But instead of being greeted by high-resolution images of flowing summer dresses and silk blouses, a brutal, unforgiving wall of reality slammed into their screens. The system could not refresh the data. The shopping carts were entirely dead. The beautiful homepage was gone, replaced solely by that stark, terrifying message I had left behind. System offline. Software copyright violation. At first, in the sprawling Oak Creek mansion, pure confusion reigned. Beatrice frantically refreshed her gold-plated tablet, assuming it was a minor glitch, a temporary server overload from her own sheer popularity, but minutes turned into a quarter of an hour, and the black error screen remained immovable. Then, the cascading digital failures began to violently bleed into the physical world. The digital rot I had introduced was systemic. The automated payment gateways that kept her international suppliers satisfied had completely flatlined. By 10 o'clock, Beatrice's dedicated business phone lines began ringing incessantly. Furious textile manufacturers in Europe and Asia were demanding immediate answers for the violently rejected wire transfers. The logistics companies, unable to pull any shipping data from the pulverized database, grounded the entire supply chain. Warehouses were completely paralyzed. Cargo trucks sat empty at the loading docks. The meticulously crafted illusion of a booming corporate powerhouse was vaporizing into thin air right before her eyes, turning her massive inventory into dead weight. Panic, raw and unfiltered, finally breached the fortified walls of the estate. The arrogant threats directed at my phone abruptly ceased. Richard and Trent, suddenly realizing that their golden goose was actively suffocating, desperately tried to throw money at the fire. They frantically contacted an elite, emergency cybersecurity and IT troubleshooting firm, promising exorbitant hourly rates for an immediate fix. Two highly paid consultants arrived at the mansion by noon, swiftly plugging their heavy diagnostic laptops into the main network. Richard hovered over their shoulders, his face red, barking arrogant orders to simply restart the servers or reset the routing switches, still clinging to his ignorant belief that technology was just a series of simple buttons. After 30 agonizing minutes of typing, the lead consultant leaned back, letting out a heavy sigh, and delivered the fatal blow. "There is absolutely nothing here to fix, Mr. Ray," the technician stated flatly, shaking his head with a cold, professional detachment. "Your entire back-end architecture is gone. The core source code has been surgically extracted from your network. What you have left is an empty, useless shell. Furthermore, the routing redirects explicitly indicate that this operating system is the intellectual property of a third-party developer who has legally and permanently revoked your access. Unless you have the original software engineer sitting in this room right now to hand over the encryption keys, your business is functionally dead." The words hit the lavish living room like a physical shockwave. The brutal, devastating financial reality crashed down upon them. Without my proprietary software, Beatrice was not a brilliant tech-savvy entrepreneur. She was just a desperate woman with a warehouse full of fabric she could no longer sell and international debts she could no longer pay. The multi-million-dollar company was nothing but smoke and mirrors, and I had just shattered the glass. But the collapse of the business was only the first domino to fall. As the afternoon shadows lengthened across the manicured lawns, the terrifying consequences of Trent's reckless crypto gambling finally clawed their way to the front door. A sleek, unmarked black sports utility vehicle aggressively parked right outside the wrought iron gates of the estate. Two incredibly large, imposing men in cheap suits stepped out, staring menacingly at the security cameras. They did not ring the bell. They did not need to. Their silent, looming presence was a screaming, violent demand for the massive debts Trent owed. The suffocating atmosphere inside the mansion violently morphed from arrogant, aristocratic entitlement to absolute, unadulterated terror. The intoxicating illusion of control had completely evaporated. Richard's old political connections could not write code. Beatrice's designer wardrobe could not restart a payment gateway. Trent's hollow bravado could not stop the ruthless debt collectors pacing outside their front window. In the span of a few chaotic hours, the undeniable, horrifying truth finally dawned on them. The quiet, compliant daughter they had mocked at the dinner table. The woman they had violently tried to extort for $30,000 to cover their own pathetic failures was not a helpless victim. I was the lone architect of their entire existence. I was the absolute master of their reality, and they had just forced me to lock the doors and walk away. The digital silence in my high-rise apartment was a beautiful, comforting symphony, violently interrupted at exactly 2 o'clock in the morning on day 7. My smartphone, sitting on the marble kitchen island, began to vibrate with an aggressive, relentless intensity. The screen lit up the darkened room, flashing a constant stream of notifications, dozens of missed calls, hundreds of desperate, frantic text messages. The fortress of arrogance they had built around themselves had completely collapsed, and they were finally digging through the rubble, screaming my name. I did not answer the phone. I let it vibrate until the sun began to rise, painting the city skyline in brilliant shades of gold and orange. I walked into the kitchen, brewed a fresh pot of expensive dark roast coffee, and poured it into a porcelain mug. The warm aroma filled the room, a perfect complement to the absolute peace I felt. I sat down on my plush leather couch, took a slow, deliberate sip, and finally unlocked my phone to survey the magnificent wreckage. I started with the voicemails. Trent, the arrogant golden boy, who had shamelessly recorded my extortion for a cheap laugh, was the first in line. His voice was completely unrecognizable. The smug, condescending drawl was gone, replaced by hyperventilating sobs and high-pitched, pathetic whimpers. "River, please, you have to pick up the phone." His recorded voice cracked, laced with raw, unadulterated terror. "Those guys, the ones from the investment groups, they are parked outside the gate again. They told me if I do not have their money by the end of the week, they are going to break my legs. They know where I sleep. River, you have to turn the servers back on. Please, I am begging you. I am so sorry about the video. Just fix the website so Mom can pay them off. They are going to kill me." I took another sip of my coffee, feeling a cold, satisfying smirk spread across my face. The mighty tech investor was crying like a frightened toddler. Next, I opened the text messages from Beatrice. It was a staggering wall of text, stretching on for several pages. She had completely abandoned the vicious, vindictive tone from her previous threats about crushing my car. Overnight, she had miraculously transformed back into the deeply concerned, loving matriarch. "My darling River," the first massive paragraph began, dripping with a toxic, sugary desperation. "There has been a terrible, foolish misunderstanding. We were never actually going to take your vehicle or kick you out of the guest house. That invoice for $30,000 was simply a tough love exercise. It was just a strict financial management lesson your father and I designed to help you prepare for the real world. We love you so much. The business is having a tiny technical glitch right now, and we desperately need our brilliant daughter to come home and press a few buttons. Please come back to us. We are family." The sheer audacity of her lies was almost impressive. A financial management lesson. I actually laughed out loud, the sound echoing sharply against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my sanctuary. They were staring down the barrel of total bankruptcy, yet they still thought they could manipulate me with hollow maternal guilt. Finally, I listened to the voicemails from Richard, the booming, tyrannical patriarch who had casually threatened me with police intervention was completely gone. His voice was low, trembling with a pathetic attempt at humility. "River, let us be reasonable adults about this situation," he pleaded, the exhaustion heavy in his throat. "I have the $30,000 invoice right here in my hand, and I am tearing it up right now. Listen to the paper ripping." A faint tearing sound echoed through the speaker. "You do not owe us a single cent. In fact, if you just log in and get the payment gateways running today, I will personally drive down to the dealership and buy you a brand new set of premium off-road tires for your Jeep." Whatever you want. Just please, come fix this mess. We are losing everything. A set of new tires. He still fundamentally misunderstood the sheer magnitude of the power dynamic. He thought he could buy back his multi-million-dollar empire and his son's physical safety with $1,000 worth of rubber. I sat back against the cushions, letting the profound, intoxicating reality wash over me, the invisible, suffocating chains of their toxic grip, the heavy burden of their expectations that had weighed me down for 29 years, simply vanished into the morning air. They had stripped me of my dignity for years, and it only took a few lines of code to strip them of their entire world. For days, I had completely ignored their existence, but now, they were thoroughly broken, primed, and desperately ready for the final blow. I set my coffee mug down on the glass table. I did not write a long, emotional essay explaining my pain. I did not demand apologies. I simply opened a group chat with all three of them, my fingers flying quickly and decisively across the digital keyboard. Meet me at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning at the glass building in the financial center. Bring a lawyer if you need to. I hit send, tossed the phone onto the couch, and walked over to the window to enjoy the beautiful view of the city. The game was over, and it was time to collect my winnings. 10 o'clock in the morning arrived with sharp, unforgiving sunlight piercing through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive conference room I had rented in the heart of the financial district. I sat at the head of this massive, polished mahogany table, dressed in a sharp, tailored black suit, exactly on time. The heavy glass door swung open, and the three ghosts of my past walked in. The physical transformation was genuinely shocking. Gone were the arrogant postures and the smug, condescending smirks. Beatrice's designer makeup failed to hide the deep, dark circles under her bloodshot eyes. Richard looked like he had aged a decade, his expensive suit wrinkled and sagging off his shoulders. Trent was trembling visibly, his face pale, darting his eyes around the room like a hunted animal. They immediately took their seats opposite me, clasping their hands together, fully prepared to launch into their carefully rehearsed, desperate performance of familial love. Beatrice opened her mouth, her voice cracking as she forced a sickeningly sweet, trembling smile. "River, sweetheart, we are so incredibly glad you agreed to meet us," she began, her tone dripping with fake affection. "We have missed you so much. We are ready to put all this silly nonsense behind us and just be a happy family again. We just need you to flip the switch, honey, and everything will go back to normal." I did not entertain their pathetic theatrical display with a single word of debate. I simply reached into my leather briefcase, pulled out a thick, heavy legal dossier, and slid it smoothly across the polished wood. It stopped exactly in front of my mother. Stamped boldly on the cover page in bright red ink was the seal of a major corporate law firm, right next to the logo of my mother's largest, most aggressive retail competitor. Richard frowned, his trembling fingers reaching out to open the folder. As his eyes desperately scanned the first page, the remaining trace of color completely drained from his face. The devastating truth hit them with the force of a freight train. I had not merely turned the servers off to teach them a lesson. On the exact same day, I walked out of their toxic house. I had legally, completely, and irrevocably sold the exclusive rights and the entire source code of my proprietary software system to the rival conglomerate for several $1,000,000. "The transaction is fully finalized and legally binding," I stated, my voice echoing with a cold, absolute authority. "The system you relied on no longer belongs to me, and it certainly does not belong to you. If I were to access that code now, I would be committing a federal crime. Furthermore, the contract clearly stipulates that if your company even attempts to utilize any remnant of my original user interface or back-end architecture, the new owners will immediately sue you into total bankruptcy for commercial copyright infringement. Your empire is completely, irreversibly dead." The room fell into a horrifying, suffocating silence. Beatrice stared at the legal documents, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish, unable to comprehend the sheer magnitude of her defeat. The multi-million-dollar business she had built her entire fake persona upon was entirely gone, sold out from under her for a fortune she would never touch. I stood up from the heavy executive chair and looked down at the three of them. My family priced me at $30,000, I said, my voice dripping with icy finality. So I decided to price my departure a little higher. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the heavy metal keychain from my Jeep Wrangler, and tossed it onto the glass table. The sharp clatter of the metal echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. The car is still here, but your empire is not. I turned my back on them and walked toward the exit. As my hand touched the glass door handle, the dam finally broke. Beatrice collapsed onto the table, her perfectly manicured hands tearing at her hair as she let out a guttural, agonizing wail of pure despair. Richard sat frozen in his chair, staring blankly at the wall like a hollow, soulless shell. Trent buried his face in his hands, rocking back and forth, sobbing uncontrollably in sheer panic, knowing the ruthless debt collectors were waiting for him and a prison sentence was practically guaranteed. I stepped out into the bright hallway and never looked back. Several months passed. The grand estate in Oak Creek was swiftly foreclosed upon by the banks, auctioning off every piece of fine china and expensive furniture. My former family scattered into the wind, drowning in a sea of insurmountable debt and legal consequences. Meanwhile, I used the millions of dollars from the software sale to successfully launch my own elite cybersecurity firm in a new city. I was finally living a life of absolute freedom, immense wealth, and complete peace, forever cleansed of the toxic parasites who thought they could put a price tag on my existence. Thank you so very much for taking the time to listen to my story today. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment, telling me your city or country. As a quick reminder, since YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, we have no budget to operate here and will sadly be forced to stop uploading new videos very soon. We are moving all of our operations to Patreon. If you found today's story engaging and want to help us survive, please consider supporting the channel by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon community. There, you can listen to the absolute best, longest, and most detailed exclusive true stories that we simply cannot publish on YouTube. You can easily join by scanning the QR code currently displayed on your screen or by clicking the Patreon link provided in the description or the pinned comment below. Thank you again, and take care.